Hey there, and welcome to my top 5 games of 2023. In this video, I'll be covering all of my favorite games that I played in 2023, meaning that not every game in this list will have actually come out last year. My hope with this video is that I can share my love of gaming by highlighting some of the best gaming experiences I had last year, including my top 5 games, some honorable mentions, and my favorite DLC too. First things first, to address the elephant in the room. Baldur's Gate 3 is not on this list. This is because, as we all know, it is an absolutely terrible game that I just didn't get around to playing last year. I'm sure it's good. You all know it's good, but I didn't play it, so maybe this year. As for some other notable games I played in 2023 but didn't make my list are The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, Starfield, Diablo 4, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Diablo 4 and Starfield probably aren't surprising since they didn't receive great reception, but as for the other two, Tears of the Kingdom felt too similar to Breath of the Wild, so while I enjoyed it, it overall felt too repetitive. Super Mario Bros., on the other hand, was very much a good game in terms of variety and creativity, but ultimately the momentum-based 2D platforming just didn't gel with me. With those out of the way, let's hop in to my honorable mentions. I've got quite a few of these this year, so I'll just be briefly touching on them in the interest of time. In no particular order, let's start with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor is a really good game that I thoroughly enjoyed, except for the absolutely egregious technical issues on PC. I'd go as far to say that, in terms of performance, this was the worst game I played last year, which, considering how many games released with poor performance nowadays, is pretty damning. While it wasn't enough to completely lock me out, I got pretty darn close. That aside, I'm enjoying this modern trilogy as a fan of linear AAA action-adventure games, despite not being a Star Wars fan myself. So I hope Respawn can pull it together to close out the trilogy on a high note. My next honorable mention is Song of Nunu, a League of Legends story. As I work for Riot and also enjoy single-player games, Riot Forge was something that I followed closely. Rest in peace. This also means I made it a point to play all of their titles. I mention this because Song of Nunu is my favorite Riot Forge game. There's so much charm packed through the numerous small details that made this an incredibly cozy and enjoyable experience throughout. Paired with its beautiful art style, this game was an absolute delight. Shifting gears, next up is Lies of P. See what I did there? I don't have much to add outside of the critical reception, but suffice to say this is one of, if not the best, non-FromSoft Souls-like. The iterations on the formula are small but strong. So when paired with really well-designed and balanced bosses, as well as solid level and enemy design, this made for a great time. My only caveat to all of this is that I actually think it's too derivative. So many of the mechanics, and even UI, are almost ripped one-to-one from FromSoft. While not inherently bad, it ended up making it feel more like a clone to me than an original experience. Albeit a very good clone that I ultimately enjoyed. My next honorable mention is Spider-Man 2, my new favorite Spider-Man game. It's basically Spider-Man 1.5 in a lot of the same ways that Tears of the Kingdom felt too similar to Breath of the Wild, including reusing the same base map from the previous title but with some twists and additions. The differences here being that I really enjoyed the Venom part of the story in addition to the character swapping between Miles and Peter, who made a great main cast. Before moving on, I do want to note that I also experienced some game-impacting technical issues, including getting soft-locked 5 times and 2 hard crashes. Fortunately, none of it ruined my save, but come on, game companies, this can't be acceptable, especially since Spider-Man 2 is a PlayStation exclusive. Another honorable mention that I really want to shout out is Alan Wake 2. This game was hands down one of the most creative games I have ever played. I'd also say that this game had the best use of mixed media I've ever seen in any game. In any other year, this would have likely cracked my top 5, but the reason it didn't is largely the combat. While it's definitely serviceable, the story and atmosphere is why this game is so good. So I'd only recommend it if you're into atmospheric horror narratives. That said, this game also delivered my single favorite level in a game this year. If you know, you know. So kudos to you, Remedy. My last honorable mention this year is Cocoon. This is the indie game follow-up from one of the creatives behind Limbo and Inside, and while ultimately it didn't leave a lasting impression, it has crisp animation and captivating music that made it a pleasure to play through. At only 5 hours long and tight gameplay centered around a single button, this is a strong recommendation for my fellow indie enjoyers. So those are the games I enjoyed playing last year and would generally recommend to you if any of them catch your interest. That said, these next 5 games represent my strongest recommendations. Even if they aren't in a genre you'd normally try out, please give them a look. every single one of them is an incredible experience. Before that, though, let's start with my favorite DLC of 2023, Cloudpunk City of Ghosts. Have you heard of Cloudpunk? Probably not, but it's pretty cool. The base game itself, I'd say, is more style over substance, but it ended up making waves as an alternative immersive cyberpunk experience following the fallout from the initial launch of Cyberpunk 2077. The gorgeous voxel art speaks for itself, but the narrative isn't half bad either. It's basically a walking simulator, but about being a taxi driver. That is to say, there's basically no gameplay. That said, the DLC took the base formula and absolutely brought the storytelling to entirely new heights. It's hard to recommend the DLC without playing the base game, given that it's basically an epilogue. But if you're looking to drive through the rainy night skies of a beautiful voxel world, then this game and the DLC just might be for you. Okay. Enough stalling. Let's get into my top 5 games of 2023. Number 5, Resident Evil 4, the remake. I hate horror games. That is why this game was actually my first ever Resident Evil. I'd heard from a lot of folks that RE4 was the best one in the series, so in spite of my horror reservations, I decided to give it a shot. To my absolute surprise, this game blew me away. The best way I can sell this experience to others is that this is the video game equivalent of a perfect campy B-movie. It's a focus on style and over-the-top action sequences with a dramatic story to boot. You are literally rescuing the president's daughter. While all that is well and good, the standout part of the experience for me is actually the pacing and level design. The game is absolutely packed full of really unique and fun gameplay sequences. This meant that despite the horror aesthetic, the game felt more like a roller coaster ride than anything else. And it was a ride that I thoroughly enjoyed. If you're like me and never given the Resident Evil series a shot, I can't recommend a better jumping in point. Number 4, Dead Space, the remake. Wow, 2 horror game remakes in a row. How original. Also, wait, didn't you just say you hated horror games? Look, I can explain, okay? 2023 was the first year I decided to really give horror games a shot. I've never enjoyed feeling scared, as video games are generally a way for me to experience escapism or joy. That is how you know when I put Dead Space as my number 4 game of 2023, you know it's a good-ass video game. Unlike Resident Evil 4, Dead Space is definitely more on the horror side, meaning if you're squeamish like I was, I probably wouldn't advise diving in unless you're really looking to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. That said, if you do take the plunge, possibly after playing Resident Evil 4 first, this game is such a masterclass in design. If you're like me, you probably heard that this game had a bit of a cult following, but never really understood why. I now understand. Everything from the varied level design and enemy design to the best-in-class atmosphere through its incredibly immersive visuals and audio, including the diegetic UI, to the extremely thoughtful pacing shifting you from puzzle to boss fights to low-grav environments to story moments, is all excellent. And you know what? Those aren't even the best parts, because the combat is what steals the show. The limb-cutting system is a stroke of genius that kept every fight tense, varied, and engaging. As someone who plays many different types of games to experience and learn more about what good game design looks like, the Dead Space remake is required reading. Just leave your lights on when you play. Number 3, Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush is one of the best comedy games I've ever played. Comedy writing in games is really tricky, as sense of humor can be pretty subjective, and if the writing feels too forced, it can often just come across as cringe. That is why I'm happy to report that Hi-Fi Rush absolutely crushes it. From the incredibly endearing character writing to the laugh-out-loud cutscenes, this game had me rolling, and so consistently too. The game absolutely oozes charm and style, while maintaining a great sense of self-awareness, something that I think really ties the entire package together. On top of this, the game also has some of the best implementations of music and rhythm I've seen, and probably what you were expecting me to mention at the start. If you're not familiar with the game, then you may be surprised to hear that almost every inch of every level dances along to the beat with you. This culminates in several truly standout and memorable music-based boss fights that were just an absolute joy to experience. All of this being conveyed through the brilliantly dazzling visuals, as I'm sure you can see. Simply put, this is one of the best implementations of a comic book style I've ever seen in a game. The world absolutely pops, which combined with everything else, makes this an incredible experience to remember. Number 2, Returnal.
Oh.
Have you heard of this game? If you're like me, probably not. Originally released in 2021 as a PlayStation exclusive and later ported to PC, this got a few Game of the Year nods when it came out, but I hadn't heard nearly anything about it. Hopefully by mentioning it here, I can give you the gift I was given by SkillUp when his review for the game popped up onto my timeline. Returnal is a third-person roguelike shooter. It is also the best roguelite I have ever played. Do you remember Geometry Wars? It was that 2D top-down, visually stunning LED explosion that made the rounds back on the Xbox 360. Well, if you do, this is Geometry Wars in 3D, and hot damn is it awesome. Simply put, this game is a visual and auditory masterpiece. I'm not exaggerating when I say that it is so good that some of the boss fights gave me literal chills. Not sold yet? Okay. Did you enjoy Doom 2016? Because that game is one of my favorite first-person shooters. Returnal is like that, but instead of heavy metal and push-forward combat, it's a laser light show with 1,000 bullets. The gameplay is a stage set for you to elegantly dance amongst the bullets, and it's so damn fun. Now this might sound intimidating from the difficulty side, and I did see some discussion online saying it was on the harder side, but personally, I didn't have any trouble with it. Since it's a roguelite instead of a roguelike, you get permanent progression including upgrade options and shortcuts. There's also a linear story, meaning if you're like me and hate runs just for the sake of runs, there is a definitive endpoint with a story told in a really unique and compelling way that I also haven't really seen much in other games. All of this is conveyed through an alien and otherworldly thematic that's not scary, but more atmospherically eerie, and it works really well. The audio design also completely embodies this atmospheric tone, further reinforcing the immersion. TLDR, if you like mechanically engaging games with a focus on strong gameplay and immersive audio, this game is incredible. Please do yourself a favor and at least check it out. All right. Number 1, Neon White. The simplest thing I can say right from the start is that Neon White was my favorite game I played in 2023. It is also now one of my all-time favorite games ever. This is largely due to one thing, and that is game feel. I care about good game feel, and the pitch for Neon White is that it's a game built entirely around good game feel. It's an FPS platformer with really short levels. We're talking on average around 30 seconds to 2 minutes per level. In this way, it's very old school design, and the developers actually mentioned trying to recapture the fun of Counter-Strike surfing when making this game. It's a game about gameplay first and foremost, and that means that every single level is finely tuned and meticulously crafted to create the perfect player experience and an immaculate sense of flow. To explain, let me break down what playing a level in this game feels like. The first time you enter a level, there's no pressure. You learn the layout and progress fairly linearly, as the way both movement and combat work in this game is through a card system. Now this isn't like a TCG or deck building game. The cards are basically in-level power-ups meant to guide you through the level. They're one-off tools that you use and discard very intentionally. There's no real puzzle solving as the level flow guides you from card to card and enemy to enemy. Beat the level once, and now you unlock a hidden gift on the level. This is meant to encourage you to explore the level in ways outside of the linear flow. Beat it a third time, and now you unlock guided shortcuts. These were things that existed from minute 1, but express more creativity and how to better optimize your time. The ultimate goal, while being entirely optional, is to get a gold time on each run, representing a final state of mastery. This experience creates one of the most elegant flows of game design to teach the player about the level through gameplay directly. In the same way Celeste does this, as a player you've always had the tools to be great from the beginning. You just didn't know you could use them. This means in one sense, Neon White is actually a speedrunning game, where optimizing times on each level is the ultimate goal. That said, if you asked me if I liked speedrunning games, I'd tell you no. This is because so many speedrunning games just expect you to be good. That is why Neon White is so magical. It basically tricks you into becoming a speedrunner through its game design. It perfectly balances an inviting and safe experience at the start of each level, while softly encouraging you. Hey, you got a pretty decent run that time. But if you just do this, you can actually drastically improve your time. Those things they mention aren't some complex 360 no-scopes either. They're all very achievable given the base difficulty. Like I mentioned earlier, Celeste is basically the only other game where I've experienced this type of design before. But the difference between Celeste and Neon White is that Celeste saves all of its big optimization tutorials for the endgame. Neon White chooses to instead break down that optimization level by level, giving you a constant window into self-motivated self-improvement that is straight up addicting. This culminates in one of the best game loops for gameplay depth and mastery I've ever experienced. If you're like me and appreciate a game with good game feel and schmovement, then Neon White is one of the best experiences out there. So, there you have it. My top 5 games of 2023. I'm sure I don't need to tell you, but 2023 was one of the most stacked years in gaming. That's also why I find it hilarious that my top 2 games didn't even come out this year. Either way, I hope through my list I was able to share my favorite experiences last year in a way that was either engaging as video content on its own, or gave you reason to consider playing some of these games yourself. If even one of these recommendations helps someone find a new game that they enjoy, then this video has done its job. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thank you so much for watching.